Welcome to the Explainer. It's one of the biggest questions of our time, right? You see it everywhere: politics, social media, maybe even across your own dinner table. How is it that we can all be looking at the exact same world, but see it so differently? It turns out the answer has less to do with the facts themselves and everything to do with the wiring inside our own heads. So here's what we're going to cover. We'll start with the hidden shortcuts our brains take all the time. Then we'll dive into the mind's funhouse mirrors that distort our reality. After that, we'll look at the incredible power of us versus them, how that gets amplified in politics. And finally, and this is the tricky part, we'll talk about seeing our own blind spots. Okay, so to kick things off, we've got to understand something really fundamental about how our minds work. I mean, your brain is getting bombarded with information every second of every day. To handle all that, it's developed some incredibly clever shortcuts. And that brings us to this key idea: cognitive bias. Now, when you hear the word bias, it's easy to think of it as just a bad thing, a flaw, but it's probably more helpful to think of these as features, not bugs. They're basically mental shortcuts our brain uses to make sense of the world really, really fast. And while they're essential, they can definitely lead us down some weird paths. So let's meet a couple of the biggest funhouse mirrors inside our minds. These are the biases that literally bend and warp our perception of reality. And the wildest part is, we usually don't even notice it's happening. First up, we've got the heavyweight champion, confirmation bias. Imagine a detective who decides who the culprit is on the very first day of a case. From then on, they only look for clues that prove they're right, and they totally ignore anything that points to another suspect. Well, that's what our brains do, all the time, automatically. We hunt for information that fits what we already believe. And look, this isn't just about arguments on the internet. Confirmation bias has huge, real-world consequences. We see it in scientific research, police work, even in a doctor's office. And today, with social media algorithms creating these filter bubbles, this tendency is just put on steroids. We get fed a constant diet of what we already think, which just makes our bubbles stronger. Okay, so this next one is fascinating because it's about how we feel about our own views. It's called naive realism, and it's that gut feeling we all have that I see the world objectively, that my take on things is the reasonable, unbiased, correct one. And here's the kicker. When we meet someone who sees things differently, our brain's first assumption isn't, oh, they must have a different perspective. Nope. As the sociologist Gustav Ekeiser put it, we just assume they must be uninformed or irrational, or maybe they're just biased. Because obviously, if they saw things clearly, like we do, they'd agree with us. There's this fantastic study that just nails this idea. Researchers had one group of people tap out the rhythm of a super common song, like Happy Birthday. The tappers predicted the listeners would guess the song right about half the time. Easy, right? Well, not so much. The listeners only got it right 2.5% of the time. Why the huge gap? Because in the tapper's head, they could hear the melody playing along with their taps. But all the listener heard was random tapping. We're all the tapper, totally convinced the music is obvious, and we can't imagine why others can't hear it. Okay, so these individual biases are already powerful, but they don't operate in a vacuum. They get cranked up to 11 by one of the most fundamental forces in human psychology: our deep, deep need to belong to a group. And that's the whole idea behind social identity theory. A massive part of who you think you are comes from the groups you belong to. Could be your country, your city, your favorite sports team, or, yep, your political party. For our ancestors, belonging to a group wasn't a hobby, it was life or death. So our brains are literally evolved to think in terms of us and them. And this creates two sides of the very same coin. On one hand, you've got in-group favoritism. We're naturally loyal and give the benefit of the doubt to people on our team. But that often comes with its shadow: out-group hostility, a built-in distrust or even dislike for people in the other groups. Cheering for us can so easily turn into rooting against them. This leads to another one of those mental shortcuts. It's called the out-group homogeneity effect. And it's pretty simple. We see our own group as being full of diverse, unique individuals with a whole range of opinions. But the other group, oh, they are all the same. We just paint them with one big, broad brush, as if they're a monolithic block of people who all think and act alike. So what happens when you take these powerful psychological drivers and you drop them into the high-stakes, emotionally charged world of politics. Well, you basically get a perfect storm for the kind of polarization we see all around us. In fact, researchers have a name for it: affective polarization. And this is so important to understand. It means our political divides are becoming less about arguing over policy details and more about a deep emotional dislike for the people on the other team. It's shifting from, I don't agree with your tax plan, to, I can't stand people like you. And of course, our media landscape just pours gasoline on this fire. Now, this data is from a while back, but it shows a trend that has only gotten more extreme. We're sorting ourselves into different news sources, and this means we're essentially living in different realities, where our team's beliefs are constantly reinforced, and we're totally shielded from what the other side is seeing. Now, it is so tempting to listen to all this and think, yeah, that perfectly describes the other side. But the research is absolutely clear on this. As this quote says, these tribal biases are a feature of being human, not a feature of being a liberal or a conservative. This wiring is in all of us, in pretty much equal measure. And that brings us to our final section, the last and maybe the most challenging piece of this entire puzzle. We've talked about all the ways our brains are biased, but there's one last twist that makes everything so much harder to deal with. It's called the bias blind spot, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It is our amazing ability to see all these biases, confirmation bias, tribalism, you name it, perfectly clearly in other people while being almost completely blind to how they operate in ourselves. We're all expert bias detectors when we're looking at someone else. So why does this happen? Researcher Emily Pronin calls it the introspection illusion. See, we judge ourselves by our inner world, by our good intentions and our private thoughts. We think we have this special, direct access to our own objective mind. But when we look at other people, we can't see their intentions. All we can see are their actions, which we then interpret through, you guessed it, all of our own biases. So really, the whole point is this: none of us gets a pass. Every single one of us is wired with these shortcuts, this tribalism, this blind spot, but realizing that isn't a reason to give up. It's the exact opposite. Acknowledging our shared human condition, that we're all in this boat together, isn't a weakness. It's the absolute first step toward what you might call intellectual humility. And that really leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? If we can start from a place of accepting that everyone's brain is playing these tricks on them, and that includes our own, how does that change how we talk to each other? Knowing we're all looking at the world through a distorted lens, how on earth do we even begin to have a real conversation?